Okay. The webinar will be starting in 5 minutes. So we have 5 more minutes before the webinar will commence. We will begin in 2 minutes. So the countdown continues, 2 minutes. So we are soon rounding down our countdown. Just give a few seconds for our host. Please let's give a few seconds to our host. The nature calls will commence shortly. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you all. I can see my formidable team members and executive committee members, our erudite panelists, welcome, registered participants who have timely logged in, members of the chapter, members of our national body, past chairmen of the chapter, governing council members, I can see some of you already logged in, the press, ladies and gentlemen. As you are aware, I am Nkechi Ayima, FCIS, your host and the chairman of the Lagos State chapter of the Institute of Charter Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria. We abbreviated it as ICSAN. So we once again welcome you to our first webinar series for the year 2021. The chapter commenced its webinar series last year, that was 2020, and so far, we have experienced huge success in the innovation of this program. Participants, particularly our members, have been enriched in their knowledge base and have been able to apply this knowledge to their respective careers. For those who may not be aware, ICSAN is a leading recognized professional body in Nigeria dedicated to enhancing the status and practice of corporate governance and public administration. It is the only professional body authorized in Nigeria to conduct the examinations leading to the qualification of charter secretaries and administrators. We are therefore the foremost leaders and the hub of governance professionals. ICSAN is also a member of the Corporate Secretaries International Association, which is a Geneva-registered global organization dedicated to developing and growing the study and practice of global secretaryship to improve professional standards, the quality of governance practice, and also to improve organizational performance. The association is a global voice of corporate secretaries and governance professionals. Additionally, ICSAN is an affiliate member of African Corporate Governance Network. Webinars such as these are one of the ways ICSAN helps professionals to adapt and update their knowledge and skills throughout their career. So visit our website to learn more and participate in other range of programs, such as online trainings, conferences, workshops, public lectures, and mandatory continuing professional education. Today's topic is indeed very timely. The issues of the National Identification Number, which have been abbreviated to NIN, has been in the news for some time now. And currently, our government has directed that by the 6th of April 2021, all active mobile numbers must be linked to an NIN. We had all seen in recent news the rush by masses to register for the NIN despite the prevalent COVID-19 pandemic. This has raised a number of concerns by many in respect to data protection and security, hacking and breach of financial information by fraudsters, and compliance requirements by organizations, particularly in implementing this government directive. In many countries around the world, we know that the national identity number is used by governments as a means of tracking their citizens, permanent or even temporary residents, for the purposes of work, taxation, government benefits, healthcare, and other government-related functions. So this unique identification number usually appears on identity documents issued by these countries. However, the ways in which such a system is implemented vary among countries. So our concern is indeed genuine on how such directive by the government will be implemented in our own client and by our own government. As you have all been informed by the National Identity Management Commission, the NIM, the NIN, is used to match your biometric data and other details in the National Identity Database during verification and authentication. So this will invariably be used to tie all records about an individual into the National Identity Database, and is also used as a valid means of establishing or verifying an individual's identity. So I'm indeed excited to have with us as facilitators today industry experts in data protection and security, and also core officers of organizations that are deeply involved in the implementation of the government's directives as regards linking our NIN. They will explore the various arising issues and the different perspectives, particularly relevant to us as governance professionals. Our moderators shall be introducing them shortly, and I urge you all to pay close and apt attention during the discourse. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, our very own Mr. Oladayo Akinlemibola, ACIS. He's our publicity secretary, that's the publicity of the chapter, and also the captain in hosting our Zoom platform for all our virtual events. He is the legal coordinator of Red Star Express PLC. So, Mr. Dayo, over to you.
Thank you very much, my chair, for the for the beautiful expose and the fantastic introduction. Without taking much of our time, I'd like to say welcome to everyone once again. I'm welcoming you to this March webinar. It's obviously probably the 7th or the 8th in the series since we took office last year in April. Now, to do justice to the topic at hand, which is the integrated national identity number, challenges of the governance professional from a data protection and security perspective. We have two erudite and industry professionals. Just to, as a prelude, we would all realize that data, like I said, as it has been said in some quarters, is the crude oil of the 21st century. So what that basically means is that data is as important today as probably the air we breathe or the blood flowing between our flowing in our veins. To put it in proper perspective, the possession of or access to data in today's world could mean the difference between a very buoyant company or one that has filed for bankruptcy, or an army winning or losing a war. So you would admit with me that, you will agree with me that, big data, like it is called, is really, really important. And believe it or not, even our doctors need data. They need your data. They need, they need data to perform optimally. So in almost every sphere of our life, data is key. And the national identity number, identification number, is here to stay by virtue of the National Identity Management Commission Act 2007. The IMC probably just woke up to its obligations and they are rolling out aggressively. So join me in introducing our first speaker, Mr. Babatunde Onosoya. I'll just read a brief introduction of our speaker. Yes. So, Mr. Onosoya is the head of internal audit in Emerging Market Telecommunication Service Limited, also better known as Nine Mobile. In his current position, he leads, manages, and sets the strategic direction of the EMTS, Internal Audit Department. Tunde is a graduate of the Olabisi Onabanjo University, where he received his bachelor's degree in accounting. He also has a master's degree in business administration from the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. Tunde is a fellow of both the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria and the Chartered Institute of Taxation in Nigeria. He's also a member of the Energy Institute, London, UK. He started his career with one of the big four professional service firms at Deloitte in 2002. In Deloitte, he provided assurance, business advisory, and tax advisory services to leading clients within and outside Nigeria on various engagements such as statutory audits, cost recovery audits, group reporting, and referral engagements. He also provided advisory services on transactions such as lease options, joint operations, just to mention a few, including enlightening his clients on various tax implications of their businesses. Tunde has experience in the energy and resources industry, specifically in the upstream, downstream, power, gas, and LNG operations. He has excellent understanding of all oil and gas arrangements, such as production sharing contracts, joint operations, service contracts, carried interest, just to mention a few. He rose to the position of an audit senior manager in Deloitte and later joined Nine Mobile in 2015. The head of internal audit in Nine, as the head of internal audit. He is responsible for continuous evaluation and improvements of the effectiveness of risk management, control, and governance processes. He also oversees the activities of the fraud and investigation unit within the internal audit department. Tunde leverages on his industry knowledge, deep practical experience, and insights in industry risk analysis. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you our first speaker, Mr. Babatunde Onosoya. Mr. Babatunde Onosoya, please, you have the floor. Please unmute yourself.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Ladayo. It's a privilege to be part of this session this morning to discuss this particular topic, which is a current issue in Nigeria. Let me just share my screen. Okay. So as we all know, integrated national identity number is the current hot topic in Nigeria as we stand, and the challenges of governance professional from data protection and security perspective is part of the things we'll be discussing today. Data protection and security has been a major topic since some of the major international entities have been found culpable in recent time for data privacy matters. As such, it is important to appreciate some of the challenges of data protection and have good understanding on how to overcome them. So this brings us to the question, why NIN? But before that, we have to really talk about the about NIMC, that's the National Identity Management Commission. NIMC regulates matters of national identity in Nigeria. Its services include NIN enrollment and issuance, national ID card issuance, as well as identity verification. So the burning question in the mind of many Nigerians is that why NIN? According to a lot of people, they wonder why we have to carry out NIN registration in Nigeria as of today. Why? Because they believe that personal data, including biometrics, have been collected for BVN, SIM registration, voters card, international passport, just to mention a few. So they believe that this is sufficient, but currently government insisted that we have to carry out NIN registration for all Nigerians, whether home and abroad. So the question is, after the question, I'll move to the next slide. So what happened is that they discovered that quite a number of people are excluded. If you look at driver's license now, it's not everybody that could that drives. So some people do not have their data in the database of the Federal Road Safety Commission. When you look at international passports, some people who believe they are poor or they can't travel out of the country, they don't even have international passport. So these people are not captured in the database. So but NIN is here to ensure that all Nigerians, both old and young, male, female, everybody, whether you are in Nigeria or outside the country, that you are registered and included in the NIN database. when you also look at some sectors are not fully developed in Nigeria. Example includes the credit bureau. Limited information is available for such sectors. It is only information from the bank loans that they have. People who have loans from other areas, they don't have their data captured by this credit bureau. So such sectors are not fully developed. Then when you also look at areas of securities, for instance, law and order, it is very difficult to apprehend some of these miscreants on the road because you cannot really identify some people. Then there are multiple and duplicated identities. A lot of ID cards are being carried on the road with different information. Some have their first names, some have their middle names. So now, that is what NIN is trying to correct. If you look at the area of terrorism as well as kidnapping, these people call freely. They even call to negotiate ransom, and nobody can apprehend them. It's difficult to actually establish where they are calling from at times. Then sometimes they have fake registration information, because as it is today, all mobile numbers are supposed to be registered. So you cannot activate any SIM card without proper registration. But some of these kidnappers and terrorists, they find a way of registering those SIM cards fraudulently, so they can still maneuver. But with NIN linked to some of those SIM cards, it will be easier to apprehend or to determine who is the owner of the SIM cards. Then lastly, when you look at effort in maintaining databases, currently we have multiple silos of databases. FRC has its own, FRSC has its own, Nigerian police has its own, Nigerian customs has its own, and lots more. So now, NITDA is making effort to ensure that the NIN of Nigerians are fully integrated together in some of these databases, which are currently maintained differently by agencies, by different agencies. So with this one, it's going to reduce the cost of maintenance, and is also going to ensure that information about Nigerians are fully available and can be used by government agencies when required. So this is the goal of focus. That is, you can see the NIN at the center. So they are trying to link NIN to everything in Nigeria currently, to corporate affairs record, to FIRS, to what's it called? The FRC records, that's driver's license, Nigerian police, as well as and lots more. Currently, a lot of people are aware that they have already linked that of banks to NIN, because if you go to banks now to check your BVN, most banks now have record of your NIN as well, your NIN number attached to the BVN. So, and that's what they are doing right now. If you also look at international passport today, you cannot apply for international passport without NIN number. In the telecom space as well, it is currently being implemented, and that's why we see a lot of people running around to ensure that they register for their NIN and they have the NIN number in order to be able to use their phone or their SIM cards after the expiration date. So that takes me to what is personal record, so that we can appreciate what we are talking about. Personal record means any information relating to an identified or identifiable natural person. Sorry. That is processed. Just a minute. Okay. Personal data means any information identified to an individual or identifiable natural person. It is any data that can be processed and can be used to identify a particular person in the system. So what we mean by that is that things like your addresses, photo, email, bank details, identification number, IP addresses, and SIM card numbers are also called personal data. In addition to this, we have what we call personal identifiable information, which can be used in conjunction with other information to track an individual. But in order to appreciate what is data protection, you have to imagine what happens if, for instance, you go to the bank and they tell you, oh, we don't really know what data about you we have or what we are doing with it. Okay, when we figure this out, we'll let you know. So as of today, a lot of agencies, banks, regulators, they collect information, they collect data about people, about individuals. This data can be used for so many things and can even be used to harm individuals. So that is why it's very, very important to protect data collected or to protect personal data collected from individuals. That is a very, very fundamental thing to do. So why data protection has to do with securing the data, data privacy has to do with the usage, the collection, the storage, and the usage of information, which is actually a legal issue. So how do we keep data secure? In order to keep data secure, we need to ask some critical questions. So what are these questions? For instance, we have to look at the type of data exactly does the business collect or receive. So it is very key to classify your business data, all data collected from individuals. Then what systems are needed to access, use, and manage it? There are several softwares that are being used for information security, or let me say several tools. In some instances, you find out that you have to restrict access of certain individuals to maybe view only. You have to ensure, for instance, that that tool has these necessary facilities. So again, what type of data specifically are in each category? What are the critical ones? What are the low risk ones? Which one do we need to give our frontline staff? We need to classify data and ensure that these are also applied as applicable. How and where is the data to be obtained? This is a very key question. Currently today, there's regulation that, okay, wherever you are collecting this data, you have to put an inscription or policy about how you are going to probably use the data. So which is very key. We have to ensure that we know where we are obtaining the data. That's the source. Are there other legal requirements? So how are we going to even maintain the data? So these are some of the things we have to think about. Is it secure from internal and external threats? Will it be shared with a third party? Will it be retained for possible future use or disposed of when no longer required? What risks are involved, as well as additional regulation in your industry? Because in addition to every regulation, maybe in Nigeria, there are industry specifics, and there are some that are professional requirements. So what are the challenges that governance professionals are likely to face? The first one is the lack of data leadership. Senior management support and sponsorship is very, very required. If you do not have the support of senior management, it will be difficult to actually implement some of these data protection techniques. Okay, people think IT owns the data. That is another challenge. A lot of people believe that all the data, as soon as you talk about data, they just believe, oh, please meet IT. They will give you access, they will do this, they will do that. However, that is not true. What happens is that data is being collected from several sources. And at the end of the day, yes, IT is an enabler. So if whatever you tell them, the policy of the entity, processes and everything that they implement to ensure that the right people are the only people accessing such data. So in other words, they ensure that we don't have unauthorized access into the database. Lack of proper understanding of business value of data governance, that's another challenge. A lot of people don't even understand what is data governance and how is that important for an organization. Budget and resources to implement data governance is also key. What happens is that some of these tools required for data protection and privacy are actually very, very expensive and huge. So some people who don't even appreciate the importance of securing data will find it very difficult to allocate budget and resources to such things. So it is very important to map out required budget and resources and ensure this is done. in order to ensure that we have unauthorized, we don't have unauthorized access into the database. So lack of data inventory, some people don't even keep record of data. Why they obtain some manually, which for instance, they obtain some electronically. But you see, putting all the data together is very important. As of today, a lot of people in Nigeria actually patronize people online. Now we have delivery, what's it called? Dispatch riders and the rest on the road. Every day you give them your information, your name, your address, your phone number, and the rest. Nobody knows what these people do with such information. So it is very, very key to ensure you have what we call data inventory before you cannot even think of securing the data that is with you. So technology infrastructure, okay, that's part of resources as well. Data identification and classification, I've mentioned this. Lack of awareness and unfamiliarity with data processes and usage. Then third-party organizations. Sometimes we engage service providers, service organizations to handle certain areas or functions in our organization. An example, for instance, there are some companies that outsource our payroll to some tax experts. In such instances, you need to ensure that you monitor or you understand how they use data in their own offices. There's something we call SOC, that's Service Organizational Control. So usually when you outsource services to some third-party organization, you are supposed to ensure you have like a audit clause wherein it is possible for you to come in, or the service organization engage the service of a professional that will audit their system to ensure that information obtained from you are secured and they have adequate processes or policies in place to ensure that such data is well secured and they are not being used for any unauthorized things. So another challenge is data overload, backup, retention, and deletion. Some don't even have idea for how long they have to keep certain records. So they just keep some endlessly. In other instances, they don't even keep some at all. So these are the usual challenges. But with the use of processes, policies, I think some of these can actually be resolved. So then we'll now look at how to overcome these challenges. So buy-in from senior management, just like we mentioned earlier, establish and assign accountability for data. This is very key so that everybody knows his or her own area of responsibility. Then there's need for cultural change, that is the tone at the top, to ensure that people really understand the importance of data and why it is actually necessary to secure the data and what they need to do. Otherwise, after spending so much money and putting in some of these controls we think we have, you discover that people internally can probably disclose or give us some of this data without proper or due to lack of understanding. So there's need for cultural change. Okay, classification of information and identify applicable regulation. Implement and ensure compliance with Nigeria Data Protection Regulation. Okay, this is the current regulation that deals with data protection in Nigeria. And it is very important to ensure that you implement this data protection. So it is very important that the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation is implemented. Why? Because just as we are saying, due to the importance of data and the current breaches which have been noticed globally, Nigeria too came up with this and they expected every company to actually comply with it. Everybody who is called a data controller, that is collecting people's data or processing it, whether here locally or outside the country, needs to implement NDPR. So then adopt and implement policies and procedures. Just like I've mentioned earlier, you need to implement policies so that people have like a guiding document that clearly states what should be done with data collected from individuals. Then you conduct training for staff and establish a user awareness program so that they are not confused as to what they should give out or what they need to do. where third party requests for information. Then you need to hire a data protection officer who is in charge of data protection in an organization. This is actually a requirement in the data protection regulation. That is, you are supposed to ensure that a data protection officer is hired and is given all the necessary tools to secure data within an organization. And this responsibility will actually be reported to the senior management team in the organization as well. Then you consult with experts where you are confused or where you think you need clarification. So this is very important. Then ongoing review to ensure compliance. This is another key one. Where, for instance, you have policies and procedures, there's need for regular audit of those processes. There's need to ensure that people comply with laid down procedures and policies. So, and then you implement, you make recommendations, constructive recommendations that will ensure that any areas or weaknesses are properly or timely addressed. Okay, constant and continuous communication. This is important. Then third-party contracts. This is another area to focus on. You need to review third-party contracts to see whether there are areas which are not aligning with your policy on data protection. So that if there's any existing contract that's not aligning with your data protection policies, then you actually have to probably come up with addendum or include additional clause and find a way of rectifying that. So I'll quickly go to data protection in Nigeria. Just like I mentioned in previous slide, the NITDA is mandated by the Act to develop regulation for governance and monitoring of electronic data. However, in 2019, the Nigeria Data Protection Regulation was introduced as a result of recent cyber security or privacy right breaches involving major corporations around the world. But before the NDPR, we had a number of, of laws and regulations, existing laws and regulations in Nigeria. So some of those ones are dealing with maybe sectional items, just like the Child Rights Act, the Freedom of Information, Code of NCC Code, Consumer Code of Practice and Regulation. So which deals with protection of consumer information in the telecom sector. It required the licensees to take responsible steps to protect the information from customers against improper or accidental disclosure. So we also have that of the banks, and that is why anytime you go to the bank, you find out that they will, in order to ensure that you are the rightful owner of the account and they don't give out the information to a wrong person, they always tell you to maybe fill some, what is the account number, they ask you for the account number, they also ask you to sign to verify your signature to be sure that you are the rightful owner. In some instances, what they do is to even take your biometrics for certain transactions, so that is what happens. But with NDPR now, Nigeria is trying to have a law that will be implemented and can be used holistically to address some of the exceptions that we have in other laws, and to ensure that it's not only the telecom or banks that came up with certain acts or regulation, but generally all entities in Nigeria or all data controllers that are collecting data from people protects information of their customers and employees. Okay. So objective of NDPR is to safeguard the rights of natural persons to data privacy, safeguard transactions involving exchange of personal data, is to foster safe conduct for transactions involving the exchange of personal information, to prevent manipulation of personal data, and to ensure that Nigerian businesses remain competitive in international space, and to provide a framework on data protection which is in tune with best practice. So it actually covers the scope of the NDPR covers collection, storage, and processing and use of personal data of people residing in Nigeria as well as those outside Nigeria. It looks at data controller and processors, whether as long as you're established in Nigeria, whether you are processing the information in Nigeria or outside Nigeria, everyone falls within the scope of NDPR. However, it does not apply to processing of personal data in the course of purely household activities. So this is very important to note. Then implementation of compliance with NDPR. NDPR clearly stated certain things that you need to comply with when you want to comply with NDPR. So what are these things? First of all, there must be a data controller. I mean, the data controller needs to develop adequate security system to protect data within their custody. So what it means is that you must have tools required or necessary for protection of data. So in some companies as well, because they don't want people to even copy information out of the system, and they still have to allow them to use their devices, they have a very robust policy surrounding what we call the bring your own device to the company. So when you are bringing your device to the company, there are security in the system that are already deployed that will ensure that even data in the database of the entity will not cannot be transferred to your own devices that are connected to the network of the company. So in case, for instance, your laptop have issues and you have to bring your personal laptop to the office, these are some of the things that are being done. Then maintain and publish a data protection policy that is in conformity with NDPR. This one cannot be overemphasized because NDPR is very clear regarding what they want now. So NITDA, sorry, is very clear regarding what is required. So, and some of these things are stated in NDPR. So it is very important to ensure that you have a protection policy that is in line with NDPR. Then continually train and build capacity of staff members on data protection and privacy. This we have also mentioned. Display a conspicuous privacy policy on any medium through which you collect data or process data. That I mentioned the other time when we were talking about the common challenges. So people, if you look at Google now in recent time, they've been sending security security information, some of these policies, and telling you, oh, you have right to do this. This is what we do with this information. This is what we don't do with this information. You can go through it. You can have the option of saying, oh, you don't want to Google to gather this data or to use this data and the rest. So this is actually very important. Then such privacy policies to contain description of the kind of personal data collected and the purpose for collection of the data. Okay, data protection officer, we've mentioned that. Then where a data controller engages the service of a third to process personal data or data subjects, such engagement must be governed by a written contract between the third party and the data controller. This is clearly spelled out in the NDPR now. So if you have to engage a third party to process personal data for you, then you have to clearly state that in an agreement signed by both parties. When they come for review or audit, they are going to check some of this documentation to be sure they are in place. Data controllers that process personal data are mandated to file the summary of their audit with the NITDA. So just like I mentioned earlier, there's need for continuous review. So NITDA has also requested that this review is carried out, and they have even given timeline for submission of this audit report. So they want to know the gaps, they want to know what you are doing with the gaps, and what probably the timeline for addressing those exceptions. A data controller is required to only transfer data to foreign country or international organizations subject to the supervision of NITDA and the Attorney General of the Federation. So you can't just ship out information now to external organization, to organization outside the country, you need to do that under the supervision of NITDA and the Attorney General of Federation. So then, in order to also assist a lot of companies, NITDA has engaged some people known as Data Protection Compliance Organization. These entities have been licensed for training, auditing, and consulting. So they believe that people might have difficulty interpreting or complying with some of the requirements of the NDPR. So these people are entities, the Data Protection Compliance Organization are entities or professional bodies that have been licensed to support the implementation of NDPR. So there is need to engage one to provide relevant guidance. So at this point, I'm going to say that because it is very important, we know that we cannot actually sit on the fence. There's need for everybody to actually decide or to put in place relevant policies, processes to ensure that people's data, information within their system or in their databases are actually secured. And therefore, I'll say let's get started, get talking, and maintain the status quo is actually not an option in this particular instance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Onosoya, for the beautiful presentation. It's quite clear that this is something Mr. Onosoya does on a regular because of the way he went through his presentation, very seamlessly. And we've been able to pick up a couple of things from your presentation, things like difference between personal data protection and data privacy, the reasons why we need to keep personal data, the fact that you can't just, ship people's personal data out of this country without some certain authorizations. You need to appoint data protection officers and things like that. But before we go into the question and answer session, Mr. Onosoya, would give the second speaker a chance to talk, and then we'll take the questions all together. So it will be very, very tidy if you agree with it, if you agree with me. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the second speaker. Now, the second speaker is Mr. Oyeyemi Oke. Now, just 1 second, I'll read up Mr. Oke's citation. Okay. Now, Mr. Oyeyemi Oke holds an EU GDPR certification and advises clients on compliance with the Nigeria data protection regulations. Just 1 second. Seems like Mr. Oke is also trying to share his screen. I think, Mr. Oke, I think you should hold on sharing your screen just for a moment whilst I share mine. Okay, so that's beautiful. So Mr. Oyeyemi Oke holds an EU GDPR certification and advises clients on compliance with the Nigeria data protection regulations. Oyeyemi has advised a variety of clients on data protection in Nigeria and has been involved in multiple data protection audits for various clients, ranging from clients in the financial services sector to clients in the FMCG, that's fast-moving consumer goods space, to clients in the insurance services sector. Oyeyemi Oke is a dual qualified lawyer as a lawyer and chartered accountant, and holds a Master of Laws degree from the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. Oyeyemi has about a decade of experience and has worked in the legal services division of an indigenous oil and gas company, where he advised on various legal and compliance issues, mergers and acquisition, and tax-related issues. Oyeyemi is the director of Tax Aid Technologies Limited, Tax Aid Professional Services Limited, and partner at AO2 Law, where he specializes in energy, projects, and finance and tax practice areas. He's also a member of the Nigerian Bar Association, a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, a member of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, and member of the Information Systems Audit and Control Association, Illinois, Chicago, United States. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Oyemi Oke to this August occasion. Thank you very much, everyone. Mr. Oyemi Oke, you have the floor, please.
Thanks for the introduction, Dio. Let me just try to quickly share my screen and we dive into the conversation. Dio, please confirm if you can see my screen.
Yes, your screen is live and clear. Yes.
Okay. The first speaker, Mr. Nosanya, has done justice to some of the issues with regards to the topic under consideration, which is the national identification number, the challenges from a government professional perspective, and looking at such from the prism of data protection and security. One of the things we should bear in mind, which I need to emphasize, is that the conversation goes beyond the national identification number. Why it goes beyond that is that the NIN is just, I'll describe as a part of data protection, or personal data rather. And we should look at this in as much as the NIN is the trigger for the conversation today. It's better to have a broad perspective with regards to what the issues are from a data protection perspective. Why is this so? It's so because the national identification number is a form of personal data amongst other types of personal data that needs to be protected. And there is significant responsibility on the governance professional or compliance persons who are listening today, because at the end of the day, the buck stops at our tables as compliance persons with regards to the organizations we work for, either internally or externally, with regards to letting them know that there are certain things that need to be done from a compliance perspective. So I would emphasize so much on data protection issues, the NDPR, why you need to comply, or why our clients or employers need to comply. What are the potential exposures, real life issues with regards to conduct of audits, real life issues with regards to how the regulator, which is the National Information Technology Development Agency, how the regulator views issues of breach. What has the regulator done to date with regards to sanctions? What are the enforcement strategies which the regulator is considering? So that's how we're going to look at the topic from my perspective, or from the presentation which I'm going to give now. But before then, essentially, identity management has to do basically with the process of trying to identify and authenticate individuals, right, with regards to the ability to either access a service, access a network, or access a system. So identity management is essentially a way through which someone is authenticated to either get a service or to actually be identified as an individual, right? And because of how technology has grown over the years, identity management is a key aspect for any organization, right? Both from a local perspective, a national perspective, or an international perspective. From a local perspective, let's look at a company that has a system, an enterprise resource planning system, whereby, an ERP system whereby there are several subsystems within that system. For example, some ERPs have the finance function, the procurement function, the HR functions, all wrapped up within one single system. How do you access services, or how do you access information on those systems? That is done through identity management. Now, if we transpose that to the discourse which we have, the idea behind the national identity number, or even the idea behind the national identity identification system, has to do with identification of you and I as individuals, using that data for the purpose of planning, and also using that data to access some kind of social security, social service, using that data for the purpose of social security, which is extremely important, and also the ability to plan. One of the key drivers why government has been on a huge drive for everyone to be enrolled for the national identity system is because we have some challenges. One from a security perspective, another would be from a developmental perspective, and we need to identify ourselves in order to perhaps improve our circumstances as a country. Now, what are the essentials of an identity management system, right? You have 4 of them. A pure identity function, which is just to identify, creation of identities, to say, this is Yemi, this is Dayo, this is Nkechi, and that is it. You also have some system which is, some systems which are user access function, that they are configured in such a way to give certain access to the users. Service function is a situation whereby the identity management system is also configured such that would allow a user access certain type of service. And the identity federation is what we call the amalgamation of all of the other types of function, such that one single or a single identity would allow someone access several digital platform. And that is the idea, or that is what the usage of the concept behind the national identity management system is going to be, an identity federation through which we can use our various identifiers to access various services or various types of facilities. Now, going specifically to the national identification number, right? This is issued by the identity management, we usually call NIMC, the National Identity Management Commission, and is established by an act of 2007, right? The commission has obligations or the duty of monitoring and developing the national identity sector. And in achieving these statutory mandates, it has now decided, or it is empowered, to issue Nigerians and foreign nationals living in Nigeria with the unique identifier, which you and I call the NIN. And also, it is expected that the entity, that NIMC is also to issue smart national ID cards. As of today, and when I say today, this information is as recent as last week. As of today, at least this is based on information from NIMC, it has enrolled about 48 million persons and has issued national identity numbers to those persons. And there is the idea is that the NIN, when issued, is supposed to be issued. You are supposed to have it for life. Another number should not be issued. However, the electronic ID cards that are supposed to be issued would have expiry dates. Now, why is identity useful? You and I use some kind of identity to access e-commerce services. whether username or some kind of login details. We use identity for the purpose of travel, which is social. Identity for banking, very easy from our BVNs. Access of healthcare. Some of us, if we have health insurance, there's some providers will provide certain numbers which would enable you access such services. Also, identity is used so that in the event of social safety nets. So let's look at, for example, what is happening in the United States with regards to the $1,400 stimulus payments, right? Payments are made on the basis of some kind of identity or the other. Identity is useful for the purpose of policing and security, which I've mentioned before, and also for the purpose of voting, right? The NIN is necessary or mandatory under certain circumstances. For example, if you want to get a Nigerian passport, you want to open a bank account, as we have seen in recent times, for landed transactions, registration of voters, and all the items that are listed on the screen here. Please bear in mind that some of these so-called transactions are not implemented yet, but the idea behind the provisions of the NIMC Act is that all of these transactions would need or would mandatorily need the use of an identity number. Now, as you would see on the screen, I have said data protection looking beyond the NIN. And why is it necessary to look beyond the NIN? As I have mentioned before now, the NIN, as far as I'm concerned, is just a very minute part of personal data, which we should be concerned about, right? Personal data ranges from anything that can be used to identify an individual, right? And I would show you, or I would let you have the various types of items that can be regarded as personal data. I think the obvious ones are names, photographs, things around date of birth and all those kind of information. But you would see that under the NDPR, which Mr. Nosanya has alluded to, under the NDPR, there is a wide definition of what would constitute or what can constitute personal data. And one thing you should bear in mind is that essentially personal data would be any identifier that can be used to, I would say, I don't want to say identify, but to locate someone or to say this person is XYZ. Now, we have in the data protection space, the question will be how unique can an identifier be? Now, at least I know for certain that there is, I am Yemi Oke, and I know for certain there is another person that is Yemi Oke, which I know for sure. And I've been faced with questions whereby when someone says, oh, yeah, Yemi Oke, I know another Yemi Oke. And the question would be, God forbid, in the event there is a personal data issue, there will be some kind of confusion, and you cannot necessarily say, let's assume that Yemi Oke's, the name Yemi Oke was used improperly, not in accordance with the law. You would need to prove beyond just the name and maybe look for another identifier that can be used to determine whether it is my Yemi Oke or another Yemi Oke. But what am I saying? Essentially, what I'm saying is that personal data could mean anything and everything to the extent that you can use it to identify an individual. In 2019, the NDPR was introduced by NITSDA, and it has what we call, or it has revolutionized personal data, data protection issues in Nigeria, and it has introduced certain compliance requirements with regards to how personal data should be handled. And personal data, or the handling of personal data, my apologies, I get to some, I think that's my Microsoft Outlook doesn't seem to want to close, but I'm trying to close that now so that I don't get that kind of feedback anymore. My apologies for that. Okay, it's gone. So personal data protection is not applicable under certain circumstances. For example, if somebody has committed a crime and an investigation is being undertaken, that person cannot rely on the provisions of the NDPR with regards to saying that my personal data should be protected. Also, in the event that collection and processing of personal data is done on an anonymized basis, where it is in the interest of national security, public health, agencies of the agencies of government can actually process personal data without necessarily without necessarily complying with the provisions of the NDPR. Now, what qualifies as personal data, as I have said? You would see here, and I'm trying to highlight, or I've tried to highlight what would qualify as personal data on the screen. And you see that it is any kind of unique identifier that includes name, address, email, phone number, account number, photographs, identification number, location data, financial record, MAC addresses, IP addresses, IEMI number, to mention a few, right? And one of the things the NDPR has done is that apart from just calling certain kind of personal data, it goes further to say there is a category of personal data which is regarded as sensitive, to which further care should be exhibited. And what is that category? Some things around biometric information, things around religious belief, sexual tendencies, political views, criminal records, health information are regarded as sensitive personal data for which you need an extra level of care when handling such. Now, what does that mean? The implication for us as compliance professionals is that we need to be able to advise those perhaps in operations, in HR, in finance, to say that any personal data that is being collected, there must be a need for it. Because if there is no need for it, you will be collecting what you do not need, and you now have a corresponding obligation to ensure that that personal data is not breached. Because if it is breached, there is a potential exposure of fines and penalties by the supervisory authority, which is NITDA. And to give you context, earlier this week, I think on Monday evening, NITDA announced that it fined a company called Electronic Settlement Limited the sum of 5 million naira with regards to a breach of personal data. I am aware that NITDA has also fined the LRS with regards to a breach of personal data that occurred in 2019. So why am I saying this? The risk with regards to keeping personal data, with regards to being compliant with the NDPR, the risk is very obvious. And gone are those days, maybe as far back as early 2019, when the NDPR was introduced, and when we typically will get questions to say, if I do not comply, who will come after me? Now, if you do not comply and the NITDA gets to know, or you are under some kind of investigation, the penalties may be stiff, and we will get there. And the question for me here is, based on our description of what personal data is, the question is, will the national identification number qualify as personal data? Of course it will, because it is a unique identifier. Now, going to some of the compliance issues which we are supposed to consider as governance professionals when providing advice, is that a data controller, and a data controller is anyone who determines how personal data is being processed, is under an obligation to keep personal data safe and secure in accordance with the NDPR. You must establish the necessary security controls and processes with regards to handling of personal data. And this is emphasized, apart from what you have in the NDPR, even the NIMC Act says that NIMC has an obligation to protect and preserve any information or data collected, obtained, maintained, or stored in respect of the national identity database. So this shows you how important personal data is, and the obligation of data controllers to ensure that personal data is kept secure. Now, I have, in the interest of time, I would ensure that I wrap this up in 5 minutes. Now, what are the principles under the NDPR with regards to data processing? You have lawfulness, that says you must process data on the basis of there should be a lawful basis for processing personal data. You must process personal data on the basis of specificity. That is, it can only be, personal data can only be processed for a specific and legitimate purpose. Personal data must be adequate, which is the principle of adequacy. It must be accurate. You must store personal data for as long as necessary. And the interesting thing with this is that the NDPR does not prescribe the time for which you are supposed to store personal data. However, there are certain industries or sectors that have specific regulations with regards to how or for what period with which personal data is supposed to be stored. Security, personal data must be confidential. You must have the integrity, and it must have integrity and be accessible at all times. What are the lawful bases for processing personal data? You have legal obligation, public interest, vital interest, legitimate interest, contract, and consent. And this is not in any particular order, right? You can pick any basis to process personal data. However, typically we say that you should use consent as the last basis. Why? Because consent as a concept is a very difficult or tricky basis, tricky basis for processing personal data, because you have to prove consent. Now, where there is always a struggle is the struggle between the rights of the data subject and the legitimate interests of the data controller. So the data subject has certain rights: the right to be informed, right to have access to personal data which you have on him or her, right of consent, right to object, right to rectify, right to restrict processing, right of right to personal data portability, right to be forgotten. Now, let me quickly just speak about the compliance framework under the NDPR. As Mr. Onosoyan has said before, now, the NDPR mandates every organization to appoint a data protection officer, right? And also to appoint a data protection compliance organization, subject to if you meet certain thresholds. There are instances under the NDPR implementation framework whereby not only are you supposed to appoint a data protection officer, but you are expected to have a dedicated data protection officer who would have no other job function but data protection. There's a requirement to conduct annual audits, right? And that needs to be done no later than 15th of March of every year. The deadline was Monday, a few days ago. However, NITDA has extended the deadline to 30th of June. This means that persons can still comply with regards to the annual audits between now and June without any fear of sanctions. Now, there are instances whereby you are expected to, apart from the data protection audits, there are instances whereby a data controller is expected or mandated to carry out data protection impact assessment, but it is not mandatory for everybody. It is only when you are going through or you are processing some kind of personal data or your activities are peculiar. And one of such is if your data processing activity includes
a situation whereby data subjects will be evaluated and profiled. A good example is banking apps that give you loan without necessarily speaking to you. If you process data of vulnerable persons, if you process sensitive personal data, and what have you. I am short of time, so let me just try to round off. Mr. Nosan has spoken about transfer of data abroad. Yes, you must show certain things before you can transfer data abroad. But one key thing you should bear in mind is that the NITDA has come up with what we call a whitelist, and it has listed out certain countries, particular countries in the EU and other countries where you can easily transfer data to without necessarily getting the authorization of the Attorney General. Also, issues around storage, as I have mentioned, there is no specific time within which to store data. So it's going to be organization specific, subject to whatever regulatory requirement peculiar to the sector in which they operate. Now, personal data breach, you must, if you're a data controller and there's a breach, you are under an obligation to inform NITDA within 72 hours from the knowledge of the breach. And you are also expected to inform data subjects within 7 days of the breach. Now, the last slide. Why do you need to comply with the NDPR? Looking at what we have on ground, as I have mentioned, the fines are stiff. You are exposed to what I call a penalty of X amount. Is that fluid? Under the NDPR, if you process personal data of data subjects of 10,000 and above, you would be subject to fines of 2% of your preceding year's annual gross revenue, or 10 million, whichever is higher. And if you process personal data of data subjects less than 10,000, then you will be subject to 1% of the preceding year's annual gross revenue, or 2 million, whichever is lower. So essentially, in wrapping up, one thing we should bear in mind, as I have said, is that the national identification number, yes, is an identity management system. It will qualify as personal data. There is a lot of responsibility on us, because by the time we start using the NIN fully and functionally, it will be part of the information which we'll be collecting as organizations, and we have an obligation from a compliance perspective to keep them safe. If we do not ensure that the relevant functions within the organization keeps them safe, then there is a potential fine or potential liability, as we have seen in our discourse. Thank you very much, and I hope I haven't taken so much time. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Oke. I'm quite sure a lot of us have gained a lot as governance professionals. Okay, so like I was saying, just one, seems to be some interference from someone. Okay, that's really sorted. So like I was saying, as governance professionals, I'm sure we've taken a lot from this short presentation. Things like compliance, I'm sure it was really key on our minds. The fact that as a company, we need to have as a data protection officer, and in some instances, if you meet some certain thresholds, you also need to appoint a data protection compliance organization. That is like an external company to do your audit, to file your data, your data returns with data as and when due. And I'm sure a lot of us probably hit a sign of relief when we heard that the 15th of March was supposed to be the deadline. However, NITDA graciously extended it to 30th of June. So I'm sure a lot of us will probably be scampering after this to do the needful And just in case anyone is still in doubt, we just heard that NITDA actually not only backs, they also bite, because apparently the LRS has taken the big stick from them as well. So you may want to look at the penalties again, just in case you're still skeptic or you're doubting Thomas out there. So basically, we're really, really grateful, Mr. Oke, for the very insightful presentation. And we'll jump right into the question and answer session. So now I can see we have a couple of questions. And gentlemen, I think I'll just ask these questions randomly. So I'll start with Mr. Onosoya. Now, there's a first question here that says, how can a person confirm if a service provider is in compliance with NIDA and NDPR? So service provider here, I'm guessing it's probably a telco or something like that, whether they want to know whether the telcos are in compliance. Do you have any particular response to that? Just go ahead.
Okay. They are the service providers are mandated to inform the data owner of their policies and procedures. So whatever they are doing to ensure that data are secured, they are supposed to explain or to put. For example, while I was making the presentation, I mentioned that they have to display it at the point of data collection. So they need to let people know what we are doing with the data. So I think that is what I know, but maybe in practical terms, I'm not sure whether you can really apply, but nothing stops you as a data owner to engage whoever has your data to confirm what they are doing with the data, and now they are ensuring that such information is secure within their system.
Dio, can I just add a bit to what Mr.
Please,
has said?
please go ahead.
So in our experience, what has been done is, so we have various types of clients that some are ultra sensitive in terms of they don't joke with compliance issues. No matter how little the compliance requirements is, they must tell you to comply. So some of those companies, what they do is that, and I'm speaking from a purely practical perspective, what they do is that as part of their procurement process, they would ask for evidence of filing of their an annual data protection audit with NIDA, right? That's one. Then two, the other part is that if the data is so much or so quite sensitive to them, they usually would have data processing agreements so that they are protected in the event of a breach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So, so Mr. Oke, I'll just give this a write out to that question. There's a question. It says, what are the regulatory interventions by the supervisory authorities with regards to enforcement of compliance with the NDPR?
Okay, so in the last 2 years, the NDPR was just introduced in January of 2019. In the last 2 years, what has been done has been more of enlightenment with regards to the existence of the NDPR, the need to comply with provisions of the NDPR. And NIDA has been quite gracious in terms of how they have approached the audits, because what their mantra is, just come as you are, right? Let's see what you have. And we continue to build on the compliance requirements. They've also given what we call a baseline in terms of what you need to do before you can even submit an audit report. And one of such is that you must compulsorily have a privacy policy that must be displayed to members of the public. Now, with regards to enforcement, if you recall, during the conversations, I mentioned that they have started investigating organizations that have been reported reported by members of the public, or which they have discovered that there's been breach. I know for certain that they are also investigating certain organizations within the financial services industry with regards to some of their activities on how personal data is being handled. Again, NIDA is also looking at perhaps being more forceful with regards to the enforcement regime, but I understand that by this year, they will go quite hard and tough on enforcement. Perhaps they wouldn't even wait they won't wait to conduct investigations as based on reports. Perhaps they will be more aggressive and go after organizations that have not even done their annual audit filings.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll just go to the next question we have here. And the next question seems to be directed at Mr. Onasoya. It says, how can data collection companies such as telcos ensure security of NIN given to it would be linked to all sensitive information and data such as financial records? That's basically asking how safe is our NIN with you?
Okay, just to let you know, okay, I will speak from practical area now. What happened is that the SIM registration information with telcos are actually not supposed to be given out unless, let me say, it is an order from the court. So another person cannot walk up to telco to ask for your the information. That is absolutely against the law. Then in addition to that, only some few employees who are frontline staff who needs to carry out certain functions. You know, for instance, when you are there at the experience centers or shops to carry out transactions, have access to it. In addition to that, third-party agents and so don't even have access to some of this information in order to ensure that they are secure within the system. So I think that is some of the things that are being done. So again, NIN is just like additional personal data that is just added to all the existing personal records that are being obtained from subscribers.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Mr. Okay, there's a question here, and I think you may need to just a quick one. It says, what does the right to be forgotten mean? I know I probably know it, but I think it's just go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, so the right forgotten is, right to be forgotten is essentially do not process my personal data. So if you receive bulk emails, you would see sometimes, and this is the most easier example, you would see sometimes whereby there is a button under or a link saying that to click to unsubscribe. That is a typical example of the right. If you click to unsubscribe, then you have exercised your right to be forgotten. So that's how simple it is.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to throw this this question open to both of you. Anyone can answer it, or both of you can answer it. Now, this is from John Otobo. And okay, John, if you're listening, I've looked at the first and second questions you sent. They'll probably need to be answered by somebody from the NIMC. The second question talks about whether every company is to appoint a DPO. If you listen to Mr. Oke's presentation, it was quite clear. Every data controller needs to, if you handle information of a certain number of people annually or monthly, you would have to have a DPO, and somebody who would probably have to have the job description would basically be to handle data and things like that. Now I'll go to your question, which is what qualifies as data transfer under the NDPR? That's the first leg. And it says, will courier companies be caught in this web as operationally they transfer personal data abroad and on a daily basis? I'll allow the both of you to go ahead, but being somebody who is also in the courier industry, I think I would also shed more light once you're done. So anyone could please attack this and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, let me quickly start before Mr. Onosanya jumps in.
Okay.
So with regards to question 1, I think Dio has been able to save us from answering that question. But I mean, let me give a bit of thought. And why I'm giving this thought is that I was able to interact with someone at NIMSI, I think a few days ago. And I mean, the efforts they have tried, I mean, it hasn't been efficient, right? With regards to issuance of the NIN, but what they are arguing now is that they are trying as much as, I mean, what they are trying to do, or some have even said, or that they've started that process, is to decentralize as much as possible, right? And with regards to the capture, how efficient that will be is something for us to see. But as at now, that system has not been as efficient as we would expect it. In my view, if I'm being asked what should be done, all they need is to do private, PPP collaboration with organizations like EMTS, such that they give EMTS APIs to their platform, such that, I mean, if you go to buy a SIM and you do not have an NIN, you can actually do that from the comfort of the experience centers of these telcos, and it integrates, or I mean, since it's an API service, it would automatically update the NIMC's database. But I'm not sure if they've done that, and I do not know if their activities contemplate that. Now, to look at item 2, which Dai has also tried to answer on my behalf, is that one thing we should bear in mind is the NDPL says, yes, you must have a DPO. Now, the part of the implementation framework that is contentious is the fact that it's saying you must have a dedicated DPO if you are XYZ. That is, if you process large set of data, if you are an MDA, if you, I think, and 2 other categories of organization. Now, the issue is that some organizations are saying that means it's an additional payroll cost for them to employ someone who would just be a dedicated person to data protection issues without combining that function with another function. So one thing you should know is that, yes, you must have a DPO, but a DPO maybe is sitting in internal audits, is sitting in compliance, is sitting in IT, is sitting in information security, right? That person can, or the NDPR has not said that that person cannot do other things. The implementation has just said that if you, I mean, the implementation framework has said that if you now fall within these specific 4 categories of organization, then you must appoint a dedicated DPO. We suggest, the suggestion is that you must, when you have a dedicated DPO, then that person cannot do any other thing, right? Organizations, data controllers are not happy with this. And also personally, and I'm speaking from a practitioner's perspective, to the extent that the DPO is independent, I do not see why you cannot combine that job function with another job function from a cost management perspective. Now, the last last question quickly is that courier companies, do not forget that they are moving packages from one place to the other that may have personal data. Under that circumstance, that's not transfer. Transfer contemplates data at rest. That is, you are maybe storing personal data on the cloud, maybe on servers that are located in another country. That is a transfer. But if you are moving, that's not data at rest because you are just moving. But that still does not also exclude such organizations from complying generally with the provisions of either the NDPR, and if it's an international organization, they would also need to comply with provisions of the EU GDPR. Those are my thoughts. Thanks.
So, Mr. Onosanya, maybe you want to take a shot?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Yemi. I think he has done proper justice to the questions. The only thing I would like to add, especially for question 1, is what he mentioned about possibility of the telcos also doing the name registration. That is actually what is in effect right now. All the major telcos are now have access to the database of NIN to carry out registration for individuals. So it makes it a bit faster, and also to ensure that some of the crowd which is currently being experienced at existing centers are now, some of them can now move to the telco companies. So what we have now, for instance, in Nine Mobile, we have one at Adeola, Odeku, Marina, but we just have some few locations because they are deploying this and is in phases. So that is being done currently. So a lot of people can also walk up to some of the telcos, ask for their locations, and also carry out NIN registration to speed up the process. So I think that's all I will just add.
Okay. Just as an addendum to that, John, I need to also let you know that I'm also going to address that third question, which is with regards to what Mr. Emioke said about transferring data abroad. Now, if you read the NDPR, and I think article probably 2.11 thereabout, it talks about transferring data to a foreign company, a foreign country. You should realize that before a courier company can move any item from point A to point B, there are two things need to occur. Number one, you must have given your consent. And secondly, you must have provided the information. So if you, and then if you also read that provision further, it also says that where it is necessary to perform a contract on behalf of the data subject. So aside the fact that, Mr. Ayemi has, clarified that it is data, it is not data at rest which is being transferred. So it should not even come under this. I'm also saying that should in case it is stretched by any whiff of the imagination to come under this, you're still protected with you're still protected with the fact that the data subject has given consent and it is necessary to execute this contract. I think we have overshot our time. I'll just hand over to my chair. My chair.
Thank you so much. I didn't want to interrupt the session because I know that it's a very rich topic, and a lot of issues will arise. Well done, my moderator, Mr. Dayo, for a fantastic job. Very well done. Well done too to my speakers. In fact, you never disappointed every step of the way. Your deep and vast knowledge of the topic was very evident. You really did justice to the topic. I want to appreciate and I want to commend you. We are out of time, but I will still do a bit of a roundup before I officially hand over to my vice chair. I want to especially commend our panelists. Your humility, your cooperation, your sacrifice, and your support throughout these days and the processes. In fact, it's unparalleled. You are available at every point in time. You answered our questions, even during our practice sessions, despite data and internet hitches, you were still available. I know a lot of us have a number of questions. In fact, if you go through the question and answer button, you will see quite a number of questions that might not have been answered. So please bear with us. We have to wrap this up. We continue this conversation offline. So if you have any questions or you have any further clarifications or comments, please send an email to us. Our email address is ICSAN, ICSAN Lagos chapter, one word, @gmail.com. We will post this after the webinar so that you get it again. ICSAN Lagos chapter @gmail.com. We have plaques that we will send to our panelists. This is a sample of our plaques, just as a token of our gratitude. We shall also send slides of the presentation to our members. We shall post them on our website. So visit our website at www.icsanlagos.org.ng. I will say it again, www.icsanlagos.org.ng. You will get updates on membership programs, events, trainings, and all past information and events that have held. You also get these slides over there. As a chapter, many of our programs and events are supported by voluntary donation. I must say this. We have companies who sponsor us, individual donors, and even patrons. One of such companies that sponsor today's event is VFD Group. You will also see from, if you can share the screen of one of their advertorials of VFD Group, they are among other businesses into banking, lending, currency exchange, asset management, real estate, and hospitality. So they have made this webinar possible. They also made some of our past program and even some future programs possible. So we welcome any donation, any support from all our future programs for friends, members, non-members, and every participant alike in today's webinar. We have given you in this webinar a glimpse of our deep wealth of knowledge as governance professionals. So this is important because I'm also a member of the Reactivation Committee of the National. Are you a member of ICSAN, ICSAN? Start now to be active. Join the pool of experts that will be called upon to assist in bringing our professionalism to bear. Are you an active member working or resident in Lagos? Join your chapter, ICSAN Lagos State Chapter, and get the maximum benefits of being a member. Also, visit our national website, ICSAN national website, to reactivate your membership and find out more about the Institute, about our programs, and about how to join as a member and remain active as members of the Institute. Please, without wasting more time, I'll hand over to my Vice Chairman, Mr. Alaba Ekundayo, who is also a fellow of the Institute, to give the official vote of thanks. Please watch out for our next event. Mr. Alaba, over to you.
All right, thank you.
One of your devices, exactly. Okay.
Okay.
You need to reduce the device to totally.
All right. Sorry about that. I was actually combining things together. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And time is fast spent. So, on behalf of the chairman of the Lagos State Chapter of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, I'd like to thank everyone that has contributed in one way or the other to make this March 2021 webinar successful. Special thanks to the President and Chairman of Governing Council of the Institute, Mr. Bode Ayeko, and other members of the Governing Council of the National Institute. We appreciate your support at all times, and we always trust and have confidence in your support and the value that you bring, not just to the Lagos State Chapter, but to the national body of the Institute. I would also like to thank the registrar who is present in this seminar, webinar, as well as our team. We thank you for finding time out of your busy schedule to attend this webinar today. Without doubt, you will all agree with me that with the speakers we have today, the two of them have done great justice to the topic through the knowledge, the great knowledge they have shared, the insights they have shared, and the wide experience they have demonstrated with respect to the topic. So on behalf of the Executive Council, I'd like to thank especially Mr. Babatunde Onosanya and Mr. Oyeyemi Oke for your support in making today a reality through the delivery of those insights with respect to the seminar topic. We cannot really thank you enough. You are highly appreciated. Finally, I'd like to thank every one of us including this, our sponsor for today, as mentioned by the chairman of Lagos State Chapter, and everyone that has found time out of your busy schedule to attend this webinar today. Both members of the Lagos State Chapter that attended, members from other state chapters, people from Nigeria, or even other countries of the world, and even non-members of the institute that have attended this webinar this afternoon. We appreciate every one of you for the time you have spent in joining and attending this webinar. So, if there is no other announcement from the chairman, I think so. This will be coming to the end of this webinar right now. So I wish every one of us all the best for the rest of today. Thank you, every one of us. Thank you, everyone. God bless.
Thank you, everyone. That's the end of our webinar for today. Many thanks, our Vice Chair, always doing a fantastic job. Thank you all our panelists. We're going to end the webinar and then briefly take pictures. So if you can, put on your videos, we'll briefly take pictures and end the webinar. Apologies once again for spending a bit of your time. So please participants, put on your video. We have someone who is going to briefly take pictures, and then we'll bring the webinar. We have brought the webinar to an end. So we'll then end the Zoom meeting. So I think we are good with briefly taking pictures. Yes, that's it. So our host, you can now bring the webinar to an end formally. Thank you so much once again. And we'll upload on our Facebook and other social media handles the webinar for people to go back to and listen to. Once again, yes, you can go ahead and end the webinar session.